Normally, anyone's reaction upon entering a place like this would be, who could have done all this? And the answer is clear, Michelangelo Buonarroti. However, what is not very clear is how he did it. Some say he did it standing, others say he did it lying on his back. In this video, we are going to talk a little about the history of this wonderful work, and of course, I will try to answer the question of how this artist was able to paint all of this. Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni was an Italian sculptor, painter, and architect considered one of the most influential artists of the Renaissance. He was born in Caprese, near Arezzo, in Tuscany, and was raised in Florence, where he studied grammar with the humanist Francesco da Urbino. At the age of 13, he became an apprentice to the artist Domenico Ghirlandaio, who had one of the largest workshops in Florence, and in 1489 recommended Michelangelo to Lorenzo de' Medici, after being asked about his two best students. From 1490 to 1492, he studied at the Humanist Academy of the Medici, founded on their Neoplatonic beliefs. However, after the death of Lorenzo de' Medici in 1492, Michelangelo left and returned to his father's house. After periods in Venice and Bologna, he returned to Florence but received no work from Savonarola, who had taken control of the city. He accepted an invitation from Cardinal Raffaele Riario to move to Rome in 1496 and would not return to Florence until 1499, when the Guild of Wool commissioned him to complete an unfinished marble statue from Carrara. It was here that Michelangelo created one of his most famous works, David, which was completed in 1504. The following year, he returned to Rome to build the tomb of Pope Julius II and also received the commission to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where he worked from 1508 to 1512. Pope Julius II believed that Michelangelo was capable of doing any work and ordered him to paint the chapel ceiling. However, Michelangelo refused at first, saying that he was a sculptor, not a painter. He also found it crazy that a sculptor could paint a ceiling of such dimensions and curved, but eventually accepted. "You will do a magnificent job," said Julius. "My architect Bramante will set up the scaffold for you." He was a very tough man, more like a military commander than a pope, and did not want to hear protests. It is said that he even once hit Michelangelo with his cane for impertinence. Michelangelo went home with great concern and discouragement. He was an ambitious man, but the Pope was asking him to perform a miracle. If he failed, all his mistakes would be permanently visible to everyone. How was he going to paint better than the painters? Before we delve further into this fascinating story, I'd like to remind you that on our website, you'll find a curated selection of artworks for decorating your home or protecting your mobile device with a piece of art. And of course, since we're talking about Michelangelo, you'll also find reproductions of The Creation of Adam or The Last Judgment. I personally ensured that the quality is as faithful to the original work as possible, so you can have a high quality piece in your home. Shipping is completely free worldwide, so don't forget to visit the catalogue after finishing this video. You'll find the link in the description. Now, let's continue. Finally, the contract was signed in May 1508, and the commission consisted of replacing the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which had a painted blue sky and stars, with the figures of the 12 apostles painted on the sides of the ceiling and filling the interior with architectural motifs. Michelangelo, however, soon discarded these plans and opted for something much more ambitious, completely covering a ceiling measuring 39 x 13.7 meters with an area of almost 800 square meters. The frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are not only one of Michelangelo's most iconic achievements, but also icons of high Renaissance art. The Sistine Chapel was built within the Vatican between 1477 and 1480 by Pope Sixtus IV, the namesake of the chapel. Fresco painting requires great physical effort. Every day, just like a mason, the artist has to prepare his mixture of plaster and sand and apply it to the wall with a trowel and palette, and then hurry to paint. He must finish the painting before the mixture dries. And painting a ceiling is doubly difficult because everything is done overhead. Just the preliminaries of that work, like lifting and holding up the huge cartoons of his figures while tracing the main lines of the sketch on the ceiling, must have been exhausting. To be able to paint the frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo designed a specific scaffold that was suspended from holes near the ceiling instead of being built from the floor. He divided the ceiling in two so that the composition would be easier to paint. 20 meters above the swaying boards of the scaffolds, Michelangelo painted, always looking up. He rubbed his neck from the pain it gave him. However, there were times when he had to spend days, or even months, lying on his back to rest his neck. In a letter to a friend, he drew a small caricature of himself while painting. In this drawing, Michelangelo has his head thrown back as far as possible. His biographer says that after the great work, his vision was seriously impaired for months. He pushed himself to the limit daily. He practically lived his whole life in the chapel, eating onions and hard bread. "I have no friends and I don't want them now," he wrote to his father. As for its composition, the frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel consist of 9 scenes from the Book of Genesis and 5 smaller scenes supported by 4 nude youths, known as ignudi. Among the scenes, there are 12 men and women said to have foretold the birth of Jesus. Above each window, there are lists of the ancestors of Christ and their portraits. In the spandrels, there are 8 more groups of biblical figures, and the entire ceiling is contained by 4 pendentives in the corners, illustrating 4 different biblical stories. The overall story of the frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel describes the creation of the world and man by God, the fall of humanity into disgrace and punishment until the birth of Jesus, the Savior. In its composition, Michelangelo combines the symbolism of the church with Renaissance thought and humanist philosophy in a remarkably non-conflictive way. The ignudi are the most obviously non-biblical figures. The 9 main scenes depicted are the separation of light and darkness, the creation of the sun, moon, and earth, the separation of land and water, the creation of Adam, the creation of Eve, the temptation and expulsion, the sacrifice of Noah, the great flood, and the drunkenness of Noah. In terms of artistic technique, Michelangelo's work in the Sistine Chapel represented an important advance in the development of Western art and was studied by artists throughout the 16th century. Over the centuries, his work has been appreciated for what it is, the masterpiece of a great artist at the height of his powers. The central vision of God's ceiling extending to touch Adam's finger has become one of the most reproduced images of all time, and the chapel remains one of the most visited attractions in Italy. As a reflection, I believe that something like this seems so impressive to us today because we are accustomed to completely different works of art. Nowadays, it is practically impossible to find a person who was able to dedicate entire years of their life to a single work. Michelangelo, besides being a testament to talent and dedication, is an example that great things are not built overnight. I would like to know what you think about this work, and please tell me in the comments if you have had the fortune of seeing it in person. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video until the end, and I would like to ask you to leave a like if you found this video interesting, and subscribe to my channel to not miss the next video. Thank you very much for joining me one more day. Bye.